Okay, review and preview. This is definitely a review. There's four questions here. It says write an equation for each representation of a quadratic function given below. And you can see there's two situations where you're given tables and two where you're given graphs. And I'm just going to discuss it for this first one because if you see how I'm using the values that I'm getting here, I think you could pull those values out from a table or a graph, and I don't need to do all four of them, so we'll just do A together. Just as a reminder. So first thing I see is I do have my intercepts, right? So if I look right here, here's an x-intercept, and here's another x-intercept, and those points are intending, they look like they're going through -3, 0, and this is 1, 0. And then I've got another point, because you always need a third point. I've got this point right here, and this point is happening. Well, it's the y-intercept, right? And it's occurring at 1, 2, 3. So it's occurring at -3. I'm sorry, it's occurring when x is 0, and at that moment y is -3. So I can definitely build the parabola using the roots, but then I have to adjust it using that third point. So if you remember, the basic equation that we're building this with is y equals a times the quantity of x minus d times x minus b, where b and d are my roots, and a is this adjustment value that we need to either compress it or stretch it so that it'll fit exactly. So I'm going to put what I know into this equation, and one of the things I know are two of the roots. So um, I'll just write this first: y equals a, and then my roots are at -3, so I'm going to write x and then minus a -3, and the other root is at x and then minus 1. So I'm going to clean that up and write it as y equals a times x plus 3 and then x minus 1. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use our intercepts, um, our intercept, and we're going to plug in the value of x and the value of y. And notice x for this y-intercept, right? For my y-intercept, x is equal to 0. So that means these two x's are going to be replaced with 0. And the other thing I have is this value of y being -3, and that's what this is going to become. The only thing that will be left behind that I need to solve for then is this value a. So let's plug those things in. So we're going to write down that y is -3, and a is what I'm trying to find. X is 0 in both of these sets of parentheses, so this is just going to become 3 times -1. And when I multiply those, I get -3 equals a times -3. So if I divide both sides of this by -3, right, I get a is equal to -3 over -3, so a is equal to 1. So I don't need to adjust this at all. The roots were enough. And that's not always the case, but in this particular case, it is. So I'm going to write down the equation of this parabola. It should be y is equal to x plus 3 in parentheses times x minus 3. I'm sorry, times x minus 1. Hello, I just need to read that. The other thing I could do is I could go ahead and expand the binomial, multiply this out, and write it in standard form. So I could write it as y equals x squared, and then I would have a minus 3x, I'm sorry, a positive 3x and a minus 1. So I would write plus 2x and then minus 3. So this should be this parabola exactly. And I do want to check it. Partly because I'm just learning, and I just want to make sure that I understand that I'm doing things correctly. So let's go back in here and change the y equals. So I'll clear this equation, and I'm going to type x squared. So I've got x to the second power, and then plus 2 times x, and then minus 3, and I'll go ahead and graph that. And there's 3 points I'm going to check to make sure that this is really the parabola that I think it is. When I give it, so again, I'm going to hit trace to look these values up, but when I give it -3, it should tell me 0, and it does. And when I give it the value of 1, it should tell me 0 also, and it does. And also when I give it 0, it should give me that y-intercept of 3, or -3 rather, and it does. So this is, I would say with great confidence, this is the equation of this parabola. So for the remaining 3 problems, right, try to figure out what the y-intercepts are, or x-intercepts, or even if you don't know the y or x-intercepts, I mean, we definitely need the x-intercepts, and I can see that those are visible here. This is an x-intercept, and this is an x-intercept, and you can also see the y-intercept. There is no reason why you couldn't use one of the other points. You could use that xy. I just think that probably using the y-intercept is the easiest way to go. All right, so finish off those 3 problems.